and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining us for tonight's episode is Jen Tanner, Vice President of Global Brand Partnerships at RCA Records. Jen first joined the label as an intern and has since become an integral part of the evolution of brand partnerships in music, having executed partnerships for superstars like Alicia Keys, Doja Cat, Kesha, Khalid, SZA, Tate McRae, and more. She's collaborated with brands like PlayStation, BMW, and Peloton. She spearheaded campaigns that have been recognized by Cannes Lions and the Clio Awards, and most recently took home the 2022 Clio Music Grand Prize for partnerships and collaborations. With all of that said, Jen, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
Thank you for having me. It's good. It's good to be here.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Bring it on.
Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
It's a very good question. And I've been thinking about it. And I think that honestly, I would probably give the same advice in both personal and professional senses to my 25-year-old self. And that would be to kind of not worry so much about what others are doing and just focus on myself and my own race. I think from a personal standpoint, I grew up in Indiana and definitely grew up amongst a group of people now that are all in the age of like having kids right now. But at 25, a lot of people are getting married and like very much figuring out their lives. And like I had just moved to New York and was an assistant at that time. So like living a very different like career path, like life path than those I was brought up with.
Mm-hmm.
And then on a professional standpoint, I will openly admit I like was very competitive when I think that's like kind of intrinsic in the music industry as well, especially in like a label world. Like people talk about market share and you talk about brand partnerships and how there's only so many sponsorship dollars to go around. Like I think competitiveness is healthy in some ways and inherent in our industry, but I think I definitely spent a little too much time in when I was 25. And honestly, I only think I figured it out within the past couple of years. Not, don't stress about what everybody else is doing. Just like make sure you're accountable for your own work and like do like focus on your own race and like that will be recognized and that will be good enough that
Mm-hmm.
there's like all it does is kind of take energy out of your own brain and your own efforts if you're worrying about what other people are doing or how other people are getting ahead. Like if somebody else is doing something that's working for them, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to do that to make it work for you.
Right.
That's something that I will openly admit I have not. I really only came to that realization I'd say in the past like year or two. And I wish I had that mindset when I was 25 because I think I just both personally and professionally. Personally, I think it would get me past some insecurities I went through, and professionally,
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with where I am now. But again, I think it was just like wasted energy that could have been like steered in a better direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think you bring up a good point too. Like it can be competition with other people, but also there's competition within yourself and like what you think you should be doing. In the music industry, there's so many people, they're starting their own companies, they're being on this list, they're doing this, they're doing that. So I think just focus on yourself and you'll be okay.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that. I don't think nobody gets to the same ending the same way. Everybody has their own path and you just kind of need to trust your gut and your instincts to get there.
Definitely. Moving along, every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we both know that it's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing when that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
To me, this was the hardest of the questions, I think. So I'm really happy that you kind of sandwiched it. So it's like get one done.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like when I ask these questions, some people say this is the hardest one. Some people say the last one is the hardest one. It's super interesting to see what people think.
I think this is the hardest one.
All right.
I think of a dirty secret is, but I think in the hopes of who this podcast is like originally set out for, the dirty little secret is it's not that you don't need a special qualification to get into the music industry. We are not curing cancer. You don't need to go to medical school. I do think there's a level of like interpersonal skills that's needed to succeed. But I think one of the silver linings that kind of came out of COVID is that we're at a time where like you, as long as you have like the passion and the drive and the work ethic, this industry is like really open to everybody and there is room for everybody. I mean, I think in COVID, one thing I really like is that internships, at least on the Sony side, like went fully remote. So like this semester, and our interns from Minnesota, like you don't need to, I think there's always been even a level of privilege in some senses of like you need to live in New York or you need to live in LA. And there's like a cost of living privilege and like expectation already lived there to get into the industry. A lot of internships now are paid compared to what they used to be. That I think you can find your pocket if you want it enough. I think that like if you're really into math, data is booming and analytics is booming. If you're more on the creative side, there's a whole graphic design lane that you can get into and be in the creative side of it. I mean, the whole reason I like chose brand partnerships to like really go for was that when I first started, I didn't know if labels were going to be around much longer. And in my mind, there was a lot of opportunity in other industries with the line that is brand partnerships. So I think find podcasts, like to find podcasts like this and any others and read up on things. I think there is a level of education. But I mean, this is coming from somebody, I got my master's in music business, and I'm the first one to say like, no shade to that program. I don't think it's needed. I think it's very much about finding ways to connect with people and meet with people and build relationships. I think there's a sense of imposter syndrome for everybody when they first
absolutely.
that like I think it's just finding the people that you connect with. I think you are as strong as your circle, and I do think your circle and who you choose to spend your time with is a reflection on you. But I think it can be done. And with markets like, I mean, Atlanta is obviously such a big market, Nashville, Miami, but like college marketing, I think is the secret tool for everybody. Like there's really opportunities if you want it bad enough and you really like, this is your passion and you want to go for it. I do think there's a foot in the industry now more than ever in wherever market like somebody lives. I don't think it's only like beholden to people who live in New York and LA with college degrees at all. So that's my, I mean, I don't know how much of a secret that is, but maybe just like a word of encouragement or so.
It's great.
It's definitely, I know it's a small and seen as like exclusive industry, but like if you want it bad enough, like you can definitely get your way in. It doesn't require a fancy degree or anything like that.
Right.
To do it. So don't, if you really want it and that's your passion, like go for it.
So you mentioned interns, and I know that you started as an intern. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice for anybody who's starting like their very first day of an internship, how to make a really great impression?
Take advantage of everything that that organization has to offer. Do not limit yourself to only learning about your department. I think especially if you're at a larger company like a label or even an agency or a management company, take as much opportunity as you can to learn about the other people who might not be your direct supervisor and learn about what they do and like just be a sponge for that amount of time and volunteer yourself for as many experiences as possible. I think the worst thing that can happen in many times is just hearing no, but you never know unless if you ask. And most of the time, like, especially when it comes to interns, like people are going to say yes, they're going to give you the time of day. I think another silver lining to COVID is that, I mean, I'm not saying like obviously bad things came out.
Right.
Another silver lining that came out of it is that like meetings that used to be seen as very exclusive, like a label meeting, for example, that used to only really be for department heads and executives are now on Zoom. So everybody at the company can join them, which really means everybody has a chance to speak up. And for interns, like your generation's view, be it Gen Z or Gen Alpha, is who we're all trying, like not all, but the majority of artists are trying to market to anyways. So like, give us your knowledge. Like, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. People, when it comes to hiring, are going to remember the people who do speak up. And like really kind of like take a chance and try to like learn as much as they can, or even ask your boss if there's a part of the music industry that maybe your company doesn't have that you really want to learn about. Again, it's a relationships based industry. Like,
Mhm.
just take a chance and ask for what you want to learn or what you want to know, and they probably have that relationship with somebody who can teach you a little bit about it.
Definitely, yeah. And I think even when you hear no, sometimes in my experience, it could be a year down the line and then it's a yes. So you never know.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask. I mean, I think that's also just like intrinsic in the brand partnership space as we come up with crazy ideas, and that's always our buffer. We always, I feel like, say like, feel free to say no, but like you never know unless if you ask. And yeah, no is not, it's not that hard of an answer. Like we can handle it, but you never know unless if you put yourself out there, and then at least you could say that you tried.
Okay, are you ready for the last question?
Bring it on.
Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked lots of questions, whether for an industry conference, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, I'll bet there was one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be the answer?
I have a couple answers for this. One, on a personal level, is I try to work it into every interview I can because I'm never asked the question and I want to be asked the question, is just about my passion for Latin music. I think it's it's something I live and breathe and was brought up with. And I think we're in such an interesting time that Latin music is pop music. I mean, look at Bad Bunny the past 6 weeks since his project
Yeah,
came out. And we're at a point where I think Latin American artists and Latin American music deserve as many mainstream opportunities as they can get. I think anywhere an Anglo artist is focused, many times a Latin artist could just as well be there. The Hispanic population is quickly becoming the majority, and then
hmm
and I know I am Caucasian, so I might not be the like first one people come to think of. I'm fluent, but like I think it's really important that like Latin artists are at like NBA All Star or at Complex Con or at areas that are like usually just considered very mainstream, and Latin artists deserve more than just multicultural dollars. They deserve proper budgets and opportunities.
absolutely.
The other thing that I would really wish that people ask more is I'd wish I have an opportunity to give my team my flowers. I think like this industry, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is so like competitive and like list based, and like
hmm
the personal recognition, like the billboard lists and things like that, they're great. Really appreciate them, and honestly bucket lists, but none of that would have been possible without the team. Like it's just one of those things that I don't think teams as a whole are recognized enough, and I wish that happened more. I'd love the opportunity to give my flowers to my team because they are amazing. I think Layla Mustafa on my team, if she wants it, there's a very good chance we will all work for her one day. And I think it's just something that this industry, nothing is done by a single person. No artist success is done by a single person. It's very team oriented. So I
hmm
wish there was almost like a list that recognized teams of people and not just individual people or executives, because it's not a direct, I mean, yes, there will be individual people who get an artist to where they are, like an A&R discovering somebody, but even then it takes usually a whole team of people to convince an artist to sign. And I just think that I think, yeah, it's a team sport, so teams should be recognized as such. So
hmm
I'm happy you asked that question because it finally gave me a chance. Like Layla Mustafa and Jamie Talk Brown, like they're the best team in the world. I consider my team family.
hmm
Um, and I wish more teams had I wish more like outlets had the opportunity to highlight successful teams and not just individuals.
Yeah, I was about to say, you gave them their flowers.
I know. I've always felt like nobody asks that. And I like they did. I mean, yeah, they definitely deserve it. And I wish there was more lists recognizing people who might be kind of in that middle to like
hmm
part of their career. I know that's hard because what do you gauge it on? But yeah, I think that it's definitely a team industry. So teams should be recognized as such.
I love that. Well, Jen, it has been so great having you on 3Q tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. To all of my listeners, I know you enjoyed hearing from Jen just as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. So stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.